Good afternoon, live from Toronto on the GBKM network. This is the Chatt Up Show, the show where we talk about any and everything to do with popular culture. I'm your host, Elizabeth Eloidy, and I hope that you are ready to chat it up with me today. Now, as always, you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen and watch live at www.gbkm.fm or www.gbkm.tv, where you can also catch up on any shows that you missed on past shows, or stay up to date on some upcoming shows that you won't want to miss. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the on-air personalities that are catching your eye, you can also do that all on our website. And to keep up with the conversation as well, you know that you can like, share, and subscribe. So everything is all on our website, but also you can catch up with us on Facebook at GBKM Television, where, as always, you can like, share, comment, and on YouTube at GBKM TV, where you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, you can like, share, and comment to join in the conversation. You know, we love to chat with all of you here on the Chat Up Show. So get to chatting. Now, also, you can keep up with us on Twitter at GBKM_FM and Instagram at GBKMFM. And we'd like to say a great big thank you to our Chat Up Show sponsors, Coded Signature, which is a Nigerian-owned local brand that offers you Afrocentric apparel and accessories with a little bit of African history melded in there. Just like this beautiful hat we have here on display with the Queen Idia of Benin emblem right on the front there, looking nice and snazzy. You can cop one of these hats for yourself at codedsignature.com. That's coded with a K.com, where you can also use the code GBKM for a 10% discount. Again, you can use the code GBKM for a 10% discount. And do not worry about where you are in the world right now, because they ship worldwide. So if you're trying to get yourself some Afrocentric apparel and accessories, just like my trusty little hat here, you can do so at codedsignature.com. That's coded with a K. Or you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Coded Signature. Now, this week, what a week, let me tell you. First of all, the world has been watching for what seems like 4 years now. We have been watching and waiting for the US elections. They still haven't finished counting the votes just yet, as they wait for more mail-in ballots to find their way in to be counted. We're still awaiting the final result. Not sure who will be the president just yet. But as always, you can tune into GBKM for your election day results, as we've already done some streaming about that last night as well. I think we can all say that we're all like anxiously awaiting the results of these elections. It feels like we're all in this together, even though some of us may not be of US nationality, some aren't even voting, but we're all seem to be glued in and interested in what is going on in politics in the United States. And I feel that social media may have a little bit of a part to play in that specifically. I mean, a lot of our campaigning that we've seen this campaign season has happened on social media, I think for two reasons. One, because the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of, flexibility around being able to host as many rallies or as many campaign programs as we've seen in the past. So a lot of it was coming to us on our social media platforms. And also just because that is where basically everybody and their mother has a social media account right now, at least on one of the platforms. So that's where a lot of the conversations are happening around what's going on in the world right now. And that's also a lot of the conversations around the elections and how people are voting and how others are urging others to vote. Though voting is closed now in the United States, it is important that everyone in whichever country they are able to exercise their rights to vote, exercise those rights, because, democracy allows the people to essentially have the power to pick who should be their leader. But today, I think that it's important to note that social media is specifically not limited to just Twitter and Facebook, as I've discussed how the campaigns have happened a lot on social media. It also includes WhatsApp, which is also owned by Facebook too. But social media is bigger than we've known it to be. It's definitely grown. The amount of users we see on it every single day has grown. As I said, everybody and their mother has a social media account. I'm pretty sure your grandmother has a social media account somewhere. Basically, the whole world is on social media, and that says a lot about the kind of information that we're constantly seeing. We're seeing a lot of content coming to us from different directions every single day. We're taking in a lot in a very short period of time, and it's very easy for us to spread information nowadays. Now, before I dive into today's topic, I just want to give a little definition of what social media is, just so we can keep it in mind as we get into our chats for today. So the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines social media as forms of electronic communication, such as websites for social networking and microblogging, through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content such as videos. Now, the point that I want to dive into is the spread of information, especially visual content. We see a lot of images, we see a lot of videos on a daily basis, and sometimes we see a lot of gruesome stuff that we can't really digest on a normal basis. And some people are saying that maybe we're becoming more desensitized to violence since we're seeing so much of it so quickly on essentially a daily basis now. Some saying that it's important that we see these images to ensure that we know exactly what's going on around us, and there's no opportunity for people to, live in blissful ignorance or willful ignorance anymore. That social media has allowed us to rid of our ignorance of what's going on outside of our own tight-knit communities and see what's going on a global scale. And I think that, social media does have some good points. This period that we've been locked away from those we love for quite lengthy periods of time, social media has allowed us to keep in contact. Through the use of technology, we've been able to keep in touch with our loved ones without physically having to be around one another. That's a good thing. However, there is the downside of social media and the ability to spread so much information so quickly, is that we can't always tell what's fact and what's false. Which now brings me into today's topic. I want to discuss the phenomenon that has become fake news, essentially, and what that would mean in terms of governments being able to control or regulate social media. And why I bring this up is because recently the Nigerian government has reproposed a bill that will essentially criminalize the spread of misinformation via social media. You could possibly get into some trouble with the government and the law if you are caught spreading fake news on social media, according to this new bill. Now, it hasn't gone into effect yet. It is still a proposal. So before anyone gets upset or worried that their rights are being taken away, it has not gone into effect just yet. This is still a proposal. However, I think it's important we have this platform to discuss this, as Nigeria is a democracy, and in a democracy the people do hold some power and they have the ability to voice their concerns and to voice their opinions, and they should also be heard by the government. So I think that we should create a space where we can really openly discuss what this potential bill could really mean for us as Nigerians, even in the diaspora, and especially Nigerians living in the country and on the continent, what that means for us as people who are using social media to essentially create movements. Now, social media with information, it's very easy to spread it quickly, and it's very easy for something to go viral. And with so many people co-signing it, it's often taken as fact, because if you see a tweet with tens of thousands of retweets and people are co-signing it and agreeing with it, you're probably going to pick that up and say, yes, this is what the world thinks and this is what's going on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that is true. It could still be fake news. And we saw that with quite a few of the remedies that were going around during the early days of the pandemic. I mean, if you recall earlier, we did a Mythbuster episode on the Chatt Up Show where we bust all the myths that we found on social media regarding ways to treat and deal with the coronavirus. Of course, putting garlic and boiling garlic in a pot of water and with lemons and drinking that, the CDC said that that is not going to help you with the virus. It may help to ease some symptoms, but it's not going to completely knock it out of your system, as people were claiming on the WhatsApp platforms and even on Twitter, saying that this is what helped them. Also potentially injecting bleach as a bleach vaccine. Shout out to a certain president. Was also some information that was being spread on social media that the CDC had to shut down real quick. But I think that especially now when we're talking about the End SARS movement, which essentially started on social media. There's a lot of discussion about what has been circulating regarding that movement on social media that may not necessarily be true, and how that has potentially led up to the events we've been seeing over the last few weeks. So I hope that you guys are ready. I suggest you get comfortable, maybe grab yourself a snack before we dive into this conversation today. And as always, I would love to hear your opinions. So please, as you're watching, comment below and join in this conversation, because I think that it's important that we all, kind of brainstorm for a little bit to talk about what this could really mean for the future of social media in the country and just at large. This might be the stepping stone for other African countries to follow suit, and other countries as well. I mean, it's not the first time we're seeing governments somewhat regulate social media, and it probably won't be the last time, as social media gains a lot more traction in our world of communication. But it's important we start talking about these things without forgetting what the good social media has done, what it's allowed, but also looking at the other side of the coin and seeing how it's also allowed the spread of misinformation. So, with the events of the last few weeks in Nigeria taking center stage, tensions have been rising as protests and looting continue all over the country. We heard about the lootings going on at the warehouses where COVID-19 palliatives were found, heard about the destructions of the Oba Palace and the stolen staff as well. But we're also hearing about the peaceful protests that are still continuing, that is still met with aggression from the army and even some police forces as well. But seeing all of this happen and seeing it all unfold before our eyes on social media has essentially put something under the government and lit a fire within them to take action, but it's not necessarily the action some may have expected. As we know, the hashtag #EndSARS movement primarily began on social media, and then it took to the streets in 2019 before we saw the resurgence happen earlier last month and continuing on into this month as well in 2020. As more people became upset, annoyed, irritated even, just fed up of the continuous harassment that they're facing from these SARS officers, from the lack of justice for those who have lost their lives in the custody of SARS officers as well, those who were kidnapped, those who were assaulted in many different ways as well. It seems that there's not much justice that's been done for those victims and survivors as well. But these protests, which then led up to the event that took place at the Leki toll gate, which many are calling the Leki Massacre, I will get to that in a bit before anyone comes at me and says that that's not what it really was. We will discuss that incident, do not worry. However, all of this has happened, and then now in previous weeks, we heard from the Lagos House of Assembly, some of our honorables, or dishonorables as they've been so kindly referred to on social media, have, aired their grievances about what's going on around the country. We had the Nollywood actor, who is now in the House of Assembly, Desmond Elliott, who came out and said that it was so sad to see children, as he called them, hailing curses on social media at politicians and their elders. Let's call it for what it was, their elders. And it seemed so sad and disheartening that people on social media felt so brazen to speak to politicians this way. It is a democracy. The people do have a voice. Granted, maybe it's not the way you wanted to hear it, but you can't take that away from them. It is a democracy. They can say what they want about their politicians, of course, respectfully. We don't want to disrespect people more than they need to be. But at the end of the day, people can't be mad that folks were upset with how the government handled the whole situation, handled the protests that were happening for the last month. Now, these social media platforms have essentially become the headquarters, if you will, of the fight for justice, and is now being put under scrutiny of the government. As I mentioned, Desmond Elliott voiced his grievances of what's going on social media, and he's not the only one. There are quite a few people who have come out and said that social media was the reason we're seeing all of these lootings happening, and we're seeing these protests turn from peaceful to not so peaceful. We're seeing so much destruction happening across the country. I want to ask, what do you all think about that? Would you agree or would you disagree that social media lit the fire for where we are now in Nigeria, for what we're seeing across the country, for the vandalism that's happening, for the looting that's happening? Or would you say that there are some other underlying issues that may have, that the protests may have been the catalyst for, but the main thing were these underlying issues, i.e. maybe poverty, food insecurity that some people have been dealing with, especially during this pandemic right now? Now, social media did, however, despite the grievances that many feel, did, however, lead to a lot of unearthing of facts that some people may not have ever known about if it weren't for folks on social media sharing this information. And for one, it is the fact that the government had provided some provisions for those who were badly hit by the pandemic and lockdown, and had offered the palliatives for them to at least have some food that they could feed on and keep their families fed without worrying about, staying safe under lockdown, which was very important to ensure that we don't continue the spread of the virus as people tried to at least feed their families. Now, we found that out through social media, which then led to a lot of people finding these warehouses and breaking into them and, ransacking them and taking whatever they could get their hands on, essentially. Now, this then led to what happened in the last couple of weeks, where it unearthed the fact that a Lagos Assembly member, honorable, or some folks refer to dishonorable, Mojisola Ali Macaulay, who had actually used these very palliatives that she was supposed to distribute to her constituency as birthday party favors for her party earlier this year. Now, this in itself, of course, caused an outrage, and there are some people who are in the process of signing petitions to recall her seat and to ensure that she does not have the same potential to be in the House of Assembly or as a House member anymore, because this was a clear breach of her power. She had no rights to take these palliatives and use them for personal use, personal gain in any way, shape, or form, that they were supposed to be used to help those who were dealing with the pandemic and had some food insecurity during the lockdown. Would you say that that was fair? Now, that isn't fake news because there was actually images circulating of that. So we saw the actual proof that this was what happened. This wasn't just some speculation that started off in a WhatsApp group that, caught wind and spiraled into something completely out of our control. This was fact. We saw it, and now people are taking charge and saying that since we hold the power and we were the ones that had the power to elect you, we also have the power to remove you from your position, and you will not be able to do something like this again. It's unsure whether she has faced any kind of reprimand or if there has been any justice sought regarding that whole situation. However, it just an example of how social media was used to, lift up the voices of what could be considered the voiceless, allow people to really take power into their own hands and take control of the situation and say, no, enough is enough. We can't have this happening. I mean, this is happening before our own eyes, and we're just expected to take it like that. So that people were complaining about being hungry, that people sacrificed their own safety to be able to feed their families, while there was food sitting in warehouses essentially rotting that they should have had access to, that they should have been able to depend on their government to ensure that they were all kept safe and not hungry during the lockdown. Now, this, of course, unearthing happened after her comments on the youth being high on drugs and that we're all unemployed, because I am part of the youth after all, that we're all unemployed and that we should go find a way to employ ourselves if that means that we should go become tilers. That comment enough rubbed everyone the wrong way that they wanted to dig in further to find a way to show that she maybe shouldn't be talking so loud because now there's so much attention on what she's done wrong. Some people said that maybe she should have just sat there and ate her food. Now, people are fed up. We can agree on that. That folks are tired. Folks feel that they haven't been listened to, especially when it comes to this End SARS movement, that this isn't the first time they've been asked to, disband the SARS movement, the SARS operatives, and yet they were still being harassed in the streets on a daily basis by these SARS officers. Now that we know that all governments across Nigeria have said that, yes, SARS is disbanded, no more, we're still seeing, military being deployed into the streets and doing what they do, harass also citizens. People are still upset. And it's much bigger, as I've said this before, it's much bigger than just the End SARS movement. And we're seeing a lot of these people come onto social media just to air their grievances as a way to rant, to talk about what upsets them about their country. Social media is a platform that allows you the freedom of speech, 100%. And especially in a democracy, that is part of it. You have the freedom to protest. You also have the freedom of speech to say what you do not like about your country and what you wish to change. Granted, some people's feelings may get hurt. Yes, if people feel that you're not doing your job and you feel that you are, but they're not seeing any results in what you claim you say you are doing, folks will get upset and folks will get riled up and they will tell you about yourself and they will tell you what's upsetting them. Point blank period. We see it anywhere, not just in Nigeria. This happens across. Heck, if you look at what people have been talking about Donald Trump, the way that they hurl abuses at him, or in the words of Mr. Desmond Elliott, hurl curses, children hurling curses at him as well, the whole president of the United States. People living in a democracy feel that their voice must be heard, especially since they are the ones that are essentially electing these people into these positions of power. So at the end of the day, the people hold the power, correct? But I will say that even with social media and with the good that it's helped to, mobilize the youth, to organize each other, to be able to stand up and fight for the change they want to see, there were some speculation about the kind of content that was being shared on Twitter especially, and even Instagram and Facebook, about what was going on in the country. And I said I would mention the Leki tollgate shootings that happened, that folks have called a massacre. But there's a lot of people, including the government, saying that that is fake news because there's no actual proof that as many people died during those shootings. There's not even that much proof that people were actually shot as much as people were saying on social media, despite there was video footage that was being shared at that time. There are a lot of people saying that it wasn't from that time. There were pictures being posted of dead bodies all over social media. Only to then find out that those bodies were expired. This is clear footage. There are people saying that the other content that we saw was not necessarily factual, that it was redistributed to fit the narrative that the government had, put the lives of peaceful protests in such jeopardy that led to the deaths of at least 12 people was what we had counted after the first day after the incident. But now, as a few weeks go on, more and more people are coming out to say that, hey, this might be fake news. Not as many people died as people are saying. So far, only 2 have been reported dead, according to the government, according to the governor, of Lagos State, and that it's not up to 12, and that this isn't necessarily a massacre. That yes, there was a shooting, but not to categorize it as a massacre. But, that hashtag is still circulating on social media. People are still referring to that incident as a massacre. And a lot of people are upset because they say that this is what led to the increase in looting and destruction that happened in Lagos and even across the country, that this fueled the vandalism that we saw. This fueled folks to be going into the Oba's palace and stealing the staff. This fueled what we're seeing now, this anger and this frustration that we're seeing from a lot of people. Now, I want you to hold on to that. And I want us to really dissect what the potential regulations we could be facing of social media in the country if this proposed bill does come to pass. Now, the bill is titled Protection from Internet Falsehood and Manipulations, Bill 2019, because it was first sponsored by Senator Mohammed Sani Musa on the 5th of November, 2019. So this is almost a year to the date that the bill is being brought up again after the recent events that have happened and occurred across the country. People are saying that, hey, maybe it's time the government really does step in and ensure that those who are spreading fake news around are held accountable. So what does this accountability look like? Let's get into that, shall we? So, one of the objectives of the bill is to prevent the transmission of false statements or declaration of facts in Nigeria. Another objective of this bill, according to the reports, is to end the financing of online mediums that transmit false statements. Okay, so this then means that measures will be taken to detect and control inauthentic behavior and misuse of online accounts, or AKA parody accounts. So for those of you who like to create accounts outside of your own identity, this may be talking to you. Now, when the bill also goes on to talk about how when paid content is posted towards a political end, there will be measures to ensure the poster discloses such information, which is important. I mean, we saw with Instagram how they implemented the requirements for those who were being paid for their posts to disclose that it is paid sponsorship, so people know how to engage with that content. This seems fair. You know, it seems fair. You don't want false information that will potentially put people in harm's way to be spreading like wildfire all over the place, of course. But let's look into what these sanctions for such offenders may be. Now, according to the bill, a person must not transmit a statement that is false or transmit a statement that might A, affect the security of any parts of Nigeria, B, affect public health, public safety, or public finance, C, affect Nigeria's relationship with other countries, D, influence the outcome of an election to any office in a general election, and E, cause enmity or hatred towards a person or group of persons. So essentially no hate speech. Okay, so that's what you cannot do under this proposed bill. Now, anyone guilty of the above is liable to a fine of 300,000 naira or 3 years imprisonment, or both for an individual, and a fine not exceeding 10 million naira for a corporate organization. So basically, it doesn't matter if you are an individual or if you are protected under an organization, you may still be liable to these sanctions. Now, the same punishment does apply for fake online accounts that transmit statements that listed above, you know, hatred or false information that puts the public health, safety, finances in jeopardy, all of those. The same punishment applies to fake online accounts. And the bill says a person shall not open an account for the purpose of transmitting false statements. Again, so for those who feel that the only way they can, you know, voice their opinions is behind some kind of identity on social media, on a parody account, and you are caught spreading fake information, you are also liable to these sanctions. Now, anyone also found guilty will be fined 200,000 as well, or 3 years of imprisonment again, if they are found that such accounts were created to spread information, or 5 million naira for a corporate organization. If such accounts transmit a statement that will affect security or influence the outcome of an election, a person will be fined 300,000 or 3 years imprisonment, or both. So essentially what we're looking at is whether you are part of an organization and whether you aren't using your real identity for the account, if you are found to be, you know, spreading false information that will cause any harm in any way, according to the government, you could either face a fine of 200,000 to 300,000 or up to 10 million for a corporate organization, or 3 years imprisonment, or you got to pay and go to prison for 3 years. Now, if a person receives payment or a reward to help another person to transmit false statements knowingly, they are also liable to a fine of 150,000 naira, and you guessed it, 3 years of imprisonment, or both. So basically the number we're working with here for imprisonment is 3 years. You're looking at 3 years either way. Now, if a person receives payment or reward to help another to transmit a statement that affects the security or influence the outcome of an election, the fine is 300,000 or 3 years of imprisonment, or both, and again, 10 million naira for organizations. Now, according to this bill, a law enforcement department can issue a declaration to offenders. So this puts the power back in law enforcement to be able to decide and issue who is in violation of these practices. Now, this declaration will be issued even if the false statement has been corrected or pulled down. So even if you delete all the tweets, if they found it and they caught you, you are still liable to these consequences. Now, the offender will also be required to publish a correction notice in a specified newspaper, online location, or other printed publication of Nigeria. So they're essentially saying you have to make your mistake very public so everybody knows that what you did was spread false information. So everyone knows that you were the person behind spreading this false information. Now, failure to comply with these sanctions, a person is liable to 200,000 naira or 12 months of imprisonment, or both for an individual, and 5 million naira for organizations. Now, we're about halfway through these sanctions and part of this bill, and what this is saying to Nigerian citizens is basically, if you are caught even intentionally or unintentionally spreading false information, because it's not like there's a big label everywhere that tells you that this is fake news, do not retweet, or this is fake news, do not spread. How would you really know that you are spreading false information without that? At the end of the day, it's up to the government to decide if it's fake news, according to this bill, and for law enforcement to then take it upon themselves to issue the declaration to tell you, hey, we saw you spreading fake news. You may not have known it, but you were. So here's what you're going to have to deal with. Of course, we're not sure what the gray area will be in terms of that when someone unknowingly spreads false information, because it's not like we're all out here intentionally going about our day saying, let me make something up that I can spread about the government, or let me make something up that will sway the election in any way. Not everyone is thinking that way. Sometimes we see something and we're like shocked by it, so we want to spread the word and let everyone know as a measure to, warn people. As we've seen with the End SARS movement, when we first saw the hoodlums, quote unquote, that they were called, or quote thugs that were going around, starting the looting and vandalism, it was spread on social media that there are certain areas we shouldn't stay in because, there are people who are attacking us in those areas. That information was spread on social media too. And as we saw with the Leki Massacre, or what is called the Leki Massacre, but, we're still learning that it may not have been a massacre, people had started spreading the hashtag around, and before we knew it, we had Hillary Clinton tweeting about it as well, and hashtagging and adding the President Buhari, telling him that he needs to step up and do something about it. There wasn't a label on that saying that it was false news, and it's taken up until now for people to, comb through the evidence, so to speak, to figure out what really took place that night. So let's just keep this in mind as we're going through this bill, okay? Now, the bill says that law enforcement departments will also issue an access blocking order to offenders. So essentially, do what Jack does on Twitter, suspending your account. The law enforcement department may also direct the NCC to order the internet access service provider to disable access by users in Nigeria to the online location, and the NCC must give the internet access provider an access blocking order. So essentially blocking your internet access if you are found in violation of these sanctions. Remember, this is a democratic country, okay? A democracy. Let's remember that. With free speech, freedom of speech, freedom of press as well. So let's just keep this in mind, okay? Now, an internet access service provider that does not comply, so if you want to shanu, or you want to, be kind and say, oh, maybe I don't want to comply with these regulations, well, if the internet service provider does not comply with any access blocking order, it is also liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding 10 million naira for each day during any part of which that order is not fully complied with, up to a total of 10 million naira. So each day they decide not to block someone's access to internet, they also face a fine. Now, with all this being said, all of this, you can just imagine how people felt about this proposed bill then, and especially now that people feel that social media has helped to, spearhead the movement that is the End SARS movement. Now, before we dive into people's sentiments about that, we're just going to take a quick commercial break so we can, digest what this bill has proposed. So stay tuned. Do you believe you could host an entertaining, engaging, and thoughtful weekly show? Or are you a business person or entrepreneur interested in building a brand for yourself? Can you connect with an audience and have strong social media skills? If so, the GBKM Network would love to invite you to join our team. We're looking for driven, genuine folks who are willing to work hard as an independent broadcaster. If this sounds like you, come join our team. For more information, email your resume to career@gbkm.fm. That is career, CAREER, at gbkm.fm. It's time to turn your passion into...
See, for generations we perpetrated psychology. Divide and conquer each other, really lynch policy. You cannot build each other up, how will you build economy?
Do you know who you are? What is your name?
Sometimes you wonder why and wonder how. Don't be alone, just stay calm, cause even if you choose or not to.
My child, recite the words of this ancient mythology. The wisdom I disperse in this verse, no apology. Memorize to keep you from evil theology. For you, the darker hue, you denied your equality. See, for generations we perpetrated psychology. Divide and conquer each other, really lynch policy. You cannot build each other up, how will you build economy?
Hello and welcome back to the Chatt Up Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Lloydie, and today we are diving into the topic of whether the government should be able to regulate social media. Before the break, we dove into the proposed, bill that has been proposed in the past in 2019 by Senate, but is now reemerging post end SARS movement, if you will. The last few weeks that have been going on and the events that have led up to where we are now. There are a lot of people who feel that there's a lot of false information that is being spread on social media, and the government should do something about that. So they proposed a bill that will essentially put you in jail or have you fined for up to 300,000 naira if you are caught sharing any kind of false news, whether it is on your personal account, on a parody account, even if you are a corporation or organization, you are also liable to these sanctions if you are found violating anything on this bill. And what you could be found in violation of is that you are transmitting false information or transmitting a statement that might affect the security of any part of Nigeria, affect public health, public safety, or public finance, affect Nigeria's relationship with other countries, influence the outcome of an election to any office in a general election, or cause enmity or hatred towards a person or group of persons. So essentially no spreading hate speech. Now, a lot of people were upset about this, of course, though there are a lot of people who are in favor of some sort of regulation to ensure that fake news, false statements aren't being spread and going viral as they have in the past. There are quite a few people who do not agree at all. Now, in one report recently, digital rights activist Benga Sesson spoke to online publication Quartz Africa about this bill, stating, quote, "We must communicate with our legislators and speak with any government representative that suggests censorship about the need to put an end to the repeated attempt at clamping down on free speech." So this is how he feels. He feels that this is a form of censorship, and this is a way that it's removing the power and the freedom of speech from citizens. Because after all, social media is a public platform. Now, Mr. Sesson is not the only one who felt this way. Another social media personality and author, JJ Omojua, tweeted his thoughts on this proposal, saying, "Do the right thing now you have power so you don't become an emergency activist using noise and drama to fight against things you have a chance to fix with your authority/mandate. Hashtag say no to social media bill. Hashtag kill social media bill." Now, another person who was also against this bill is social media activist Renu, who's known as Savvy Renu on Twitter, who was one of the folks on the front lines at the beginning of this year's End SARS protest, also tweeted their feelings on this proposed bill, saying they never expected that we will sorrow soke. It shocked them. Now they want to silence us. That time has passed. We refuse to be gagged. Hashtag say no to social media bill. Now, it is understandable that people are wary of this bill. I mean, from what I've previously discussed about what is on this bill, it does seem very much so like hardcore censorship. And there are some pretty serious consequences that folks may be facing if they are found in violation of this. If this proposed, again, it is just a proposed bill. It has not gone into effect. It still needs to be voted on. So if it does go into effect, that this is something that people will be facing. It's essentially a form of censorship. Whichever way you want to look at it, it is. It puts the power back in the government's hand to decide what is essentially fake news and what isn't. Now, as I said, it's understandable that people are wary and of this proposed bill and of the proposing of criminalizing the spread of false news and potentially putting, as I said, the control back in the government's hand to decide what is fake news and what's not. It's really a slippery slope because it could go either way. It could help to squash the spread of false news or to limit it at least, not have it happen as much or as quickly as it has in the past. It could help to, keep it under control. It could. However, if it is put in the hands of people who love to abuse power, it could really turn into something bigger and greater than we want it to be. It could really become something that's greater in terms of censorship that citizens in a democratic country do not want to see. I'm going to keep repeating that Nigeria is a democracy at the end of the day, so we can still vote on this. Power is still in the people's hand before this bill goes into effect, so let's keep that in mind, okay? This is something serious that I think we should all really be talking about. I understand fully where people are coming from when it comes to the spread of false news, when it's putting people's lives in danger 100%. However, if we're allowing folks who in the past may not have, have that much, that people don't have that much trust in, let's just put it that way, that folks don't really have that much trust in the government right now, and then they now get to decide what is considered fake news and what isn't. You never know what could happen with that, especially when the law enforcement is involved. And in the past, law enforcement is literally how we ended up here. People were protesting against the brutality they faced at the hands of law enforcement. And now you want to give them the power to choose what is fake news and what isn't? It seems, as again, it's a slippery slope. It could be worrisome for some to see this happening. I mean, for those of us in the diaspora, we could think, okay, well, this won't affect us because we're not living in Nigeria. However, it still affects us to some degree. So it's important that we do discuss what is in this bill so that people know what is in this bill, so that they know what they are voting for or voting against, and understanding what that means in terms of how the government will be able to regulate and control social media. They are proposing that they can remove your access, your internet access, if they find that you are spreading false information. Let that sink in. Okay? Again, I will say that, of course, we do not want to see the spread of fake news. I mean, we know that that could be detrimental to the safety of the population. Like, for example, when President Trump suggested, bleach vaccines for COVID-19. That was quickly flagged on Facebook even and on Twitter as fake news in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was flagged. So there is some infrastructure on these social media sites that does allow for us to flag what is considered fake news. So maybe instead of proposing criminalizing it, maybe let's take some baby steps first and start, putting a public message that says that some of the contents of this tweet or this message or whatever may include some false statements or misinformation, as they are already doing on Twitter. I mean, I've seen it today. There was a tweet about Donald Trump talking about how it was a big win. We don't know if he's won yet. So, of course, Twitter flagged that as false election information because it wasn't true. Isn't a big win yet. Not all the votes have been counted. So maybe this is the step the Nigerian government needs to take, is to work with these social media platforms to, add their whatevers to include into the structure of these platforms to, label something that may be seen as fake news so that other people know and are wary. But to criminalize it, I feel that that is too strong of a reaction at this stage. It's too strong. To send someone to prison for a tweet that they may or may not have known, was false information just seems like it's a bit too much at this stage. So baby steps, to reach a happy medium would maybe to work with Twitter, work with Facebook to be like, hey, this information, we have the facts to prove that this information is false. Therefore, can you flag it so that when people do share it, they know that it is fake news? But if there's no way to know what is fake news and what's not, how will we then, as the citizens, potentially help the government to ensure that things are regulated on social media as well? So all the power is just going to be in the government's hand to pick and choose what is and what isn't? Where does that leave the citizens? What power do they have over it on these very public platforms? Global platforms too. Now, as I said, that Facebook and Twitter already have the infrastructure in place to flag things that are fake news. So that goes to show that these platforms take note of the power of social media, the power that it has to spread information quickly, and notes the importance of ensuring that the information that is spread is relevant, and also factual, so we're not continuously seeing fake news plastered everywhere. They have the infrastructure to say, hey, we fact-checked this and we found that this is not true. So it shows that this isn't just something that's going on in Nigeria, of course. Fake news isn't just limited to Nigeria. I mean, we probably first heard the term fake news when President Trump was first campaigning in 2016 for the presidency, where he called almost all media organizations that didn't, kiss his feet, essentially, fake news. All media organizations that were talking about everything that he had done in the past that may not necessarily be desirable these days as fake news. He was just throwing that word around. And it feels that now there are a lot of people who have jumped on that bandwagon of just throwing around the term fake news as well when it doesn't fit the narrative they want to see. And this is on both sides. I'm not saying that this is something only the government does or only the citizen does. It could happen on both sides, where if something doesn't fit your narrative, your first response is to say, no, that's not true. No, we do not agree. Of course, that doesn't help anybody, because then again, that is also peddling false information. If it is the truth and you're saying that it's fake news, that in itself is fake news too. So that brings up the question of who will then also regulate who's picking and choosing what is determined as fake news and what isn't. Will it be the government? So then what happens if a governor, for example, spreads misinformation? Will they also be held to the same degree? Will they also be held accountable? Will their accounts be locked? Will they also lose internet access as a whole governor in the country? Or is this just limited to citizens who do not hold a seat in the government? I think these are questions that all Nigerians should be thinking about, especially when we're considering this bill. Again, I want to reiterate, of course, we do not want to see the spread of information that can lead to destruction, that can lead to our country being torn down. Nobody wants that for Nigeria. We all want Nigeria to excel. We want to see these changes happening so that our country can be the great Nigeria that it's been claimed to be for so many years, but a lot of us aren't seeing. We have used social media in the past to hold the necessary parties accountable, to say, hey, this is the facts that we have. This is the information we have. Now that we know what's going on, let's do something about it. For example, when those party favor images were spreading across social media, it, put everyone into action saying that this kind of person could not be in a position of power because this is what they're doing to their own constituents. Let's do something about it. Happened on social media. Now, if someone had seen that and said, oh no, this is photoshopped, this is fake news, what would have then happened if this bill was passed to the person who had first posted that picture? Will there be a justice system that will allow for them to speak their case, to, provide the facts that they want to provide? Or will it just be like, hey, we said this is fake news, therefore it is, and that's the end of that? Sorry, you got to pay the fine, or you got to go to prison, or you got to do both. Now, for those who are thinking, Nigeria is not the only country that's proposed this, it's not the only country that's put this into effect, you're right. Nigeria is not the only country that's considered regulating social media. Donald Trump has even said that social media needs to be regulated as well. Not the only country that's thought that social media and the spread of fake news is detrimental to the safety of the public at large, and there needs to be something done about it. Of course, 1000%. China, for example, is a country that saw this and said that, hey, the government needs to do something about it. So let's talk about China. Now, China has some regulations put in place. We know that it's strictly regulated, the use of social media in the country, so much so that some platforms like Facebook and Google are essentially banned and can only be accessed using a VPN. So is that where we want to go? Where a search engine like Google, of course, they've created their own social media platforms that they can use as well. That is also regulated and monitored by the government too, to ensure that there isn't any kind of hate speech being spread and misinformation being spread. But that doesn't necessarily remove the issue of rumors and, false information, fake news, quote unquote, being spread either, according to the government, of course. Now, Chinese law prohibits any online publication and transmission of false information that may disrupt the economic or social order. The law also bans other information, such as information that may endanger national security, overturn the socialist system, or infringe on the reputation of others. So pretty similar to what the Nigerian bill is proposing. Now, spreading false information that seriously disturbs public order through an information network or other media is a crime punishable by up to 7 years in prison in China. And social media platforms must maintain a license to operate businesses in China. So this is all part of their regulations on how to ensure that the spread of rumors and fake news does not continue within China. Now, users are also required to register their real names and other identity information with service providers. So for those of you who like to, stan accounts, who like to create accounts without your real name or your real photo, without your real identity, it's tough to do that in China because you're required to register your identity to get onto these platforms. Now, despite these strict regulations of the media and internet, misinformation, or what Chinese laws and domestic media often refer to as rumors, still appears to be permeating the internet and social media in China. Now, this report was conducted by the government, the Chinese government, so it is, in their view, what is considered rumors and what is considered false information. But in previous years, we've seen protests that started on social media in China. For example, when we saw the Me Too movement first get traction on social media, which we remember was to give power to the voiceless and to survivors of sexual assault, those in China could not actually use that hashtag because it was prohibited, so they had to find a new way using different language, different verbiage, different hashtags to, start their own protest, to join in this movement because of these restrictions that have been put in place by the government. Because if they had, done hashtag Me Too as well, it could have been considered a rumor and they could be facing up to 7 years in prison. So this is just another example of a country that decided to, put it into the government's hands, put the control of regulating social media and the spread of information into the government's hands. So essentially, the government has full control over what information we know about it. So what we're seeing now, the children, quote unquote, as lovely, honorable Desmond Elliott put it, they could not hail curses on the government. They can't speak badly about the government because that is considered rumor or hate speech as well. Now, again, I'm going to reiterate it. Nigeria is a democracy that allows the public to have a voice, to be able to hold their officials and leaders accountable for their actions or lack thereof. However, if we go down this road of trying to regulate something so strictly with such intense punishments, as I said before, it's a slippery slope. We could end up in a position like China where you need a VPN just to use Twitter, where the government can decide to, remove your internet access because they felt that you were sharing fake news and ask you to spend or pay the fine of 300,000 naira, which, by the way, isn't even the annual salary some people are earning in Nigeria. So how would you expect someone to pay 300,000 for spreading fake news? And as I said, who is to say what is considered fake news or not? And who can tell what is fake news? If, as I said before, if you see a tweet with over 10,000 likes and retweets, and you see so many people co-signing it, And you too, you want to click retweet, or you want to share or add your 2 cents to it, or add your opinion to the tweet, only to find out later that that is fake news. And you take it upon yourself to say, oh, deleted, found out that that is fake news. Sorry, won't spread that again. You are still liable under this proposed bill. You are still liable, even if you catch yourself making that error after learning that it was fake news and publicly state that you know now that it was fake news. You could still be liable under this bill. So it's interesting if we think about it that way, what this could potentially mean for censorship in Nigeria, for freedom of speech, for even democracy at large. Because if you say that, hey, I do not like this political party, could that be considered you trying to sway an election, in a general election? You voicing your opinion of a political party, or even you voicing your opinion of the government, of the president, because I've seen that a lot happening, where people have even taken it so far to be carrying around an empty coffin, claiming that that is President Buhari's coffin. That is cryptic, very cryptic. Of course, that should, you know, be controlled and regulated, because that isn't something that we should be seeing or should be participating in. But it's an example of what could be considered violation of these new proposed sanctions of regulating social media. So again, I ask you, should the government be in charge of regulating social media? And how far is too far in terms of regulation? Is what you, in your opinion, is what is included in this proposed bill far enough, too far, or not enough regulation in terms of helping to stop the spread of misinformation? Again, I want to reiterate that on quite a few of these social media platforms, there is already the infrastructure in place to highlight and tag what is considered fake news or what could be considered misinformation, using their fact checking, just to let people know that, hey, by the way, the contents of this tweet may have some misinformation. Maybe that is something that the government should look into and consider partnering up with these social media sites to include in, instead of going straight to criminalizing. It seems like a little too far-fetched to tell someone that how you tweeted something that is now false, you could be going to prison. Now, I will leave you with that as we are concluding the show for today, and I want you to be thinking about the contents of this bill. As you know, it is still democracy, so we will have to vote on this bill to vote it in and see it come to fruition if it could or not, stopping it, as a lot of people are saying, #no to the social media bill, because they recognize that it's something that is very strict censorship for the country. Now, with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in and joining into the Chatt Up Show today. I've been your host, Elizabeth Aloyde, and as always, you know, you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen live 24/7 and watch past shows and learn about upcoming shows on our website at www.gbkm.fm or www.gbkm.tv. And coming very, very soon, we will have our very own app where you can also like, share, comment, subscribe, and watch live. It's going to be the GBKM app, both on Google Play Store and App Store. You can also remember to keep up with our sponsor, Coded Signature, where you can get your discount of 10% off at GBKM using the code GBKM. And you can follow me, your host, Elizabeth Aloyde, on Twitter and Instagram at TIS_Liz_O. And I hope that you all stay safe. You take care, because remember, there is still a pandemic going on. Ensure that you are taking care of yourselves, washing your hands, keeping your social distance and physical distance 2 feet. And if you are under lockdown, please remember to stay within your home for as long as you need to ensure that we can go into 2021 as healthy as possible on a global scale. Now, with that, I will chat with you at the same time, same place next week. Take care.
Do you know who you are? What is your name?
Sometimes you wonder why and wonder how. Don't be alone. Just stay calm, cause even if you choose or not to.
My child, recite the words of this ancient mythology. The wisdom I disperse in this verse, no apology. Memorize to keep you from evil theology. For you, the darker hue, you denied your equality. See, for generations we perpetrated psychology. Divide and conquer each other, really lynch policy. You cannot build each other up, how will you build economy?
Good afternoon, live from Toronto on the GBKM network. This is the Chatt Up Show, the show where we talk about any and everything to do with popular culture. I'm your host, Elizabeth Eloidy, and I hope that you are ready to chat it up with me today. Now, as always, you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen and watch live at www.gbkm.fm or www.gbkm.tv, where you can also catch up on any shows that you missed on past shows or stay up to date on some upcoming shows that you won't want to miss. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the on-air personalities that are catching your eye, you can also do that all on our website. And to keep up with the conversation as well, you know that you can like, share, and subscribe. So everything is all on our website, but also you can catch up with us on Facebook at GBKM Television, where, as always, you can like, share, comment, and on YouTube at GBKM TV, where you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, you can like, share, and comment to join in the conversation. You know, we love to chat with all of you here on the Chatt Up Show. So get to chatting. Now, also, you can keep up with us on Twitter at GBKM_FM and Instagram at GBKMFM. And we'd like to say a great big thank you to our Chatt Up Show sponsors, Coded Signature, which is a Nigerian-owned local brand that offers you Afrocentric apparel and accessories with a little bit of African history melded in there. Just like this beautiful hat we have here on display with the Queen Idia of Benin emblem right on the front there, looking nice and snazzy. You can cop one of these hats for yourself at codedsignature.com. That's coded with a K.com, where you can also use the code GBKM for a 10% discount. Again, you can use the code GBKM for a 10% discount. And do not worry about where you are in the world right now, because they ship worldwide. So if you're trying to get yourself some Afrocentric apparel and accessories, just like my trusty little hat here, you can do so at codedsignature.com. That's coded with a K. Or you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Coded Signature. Now, this week, what a week, let me tell you. First of all, the world has been watching for what seems like 4 years now. We have been watching and waiting for the US elections. They still haven't finished counting the votes just yet, as they wait for more mail-in ballots to find their way in to be counted. We're still awaiting the final result. Not sure who will be the president just yet. But as always, you can tune into GBKM for your election day results, as we've already done some streaming about that last night as well. I think we can all say that we're all like anxiously awaiting the results of these elections. It feels like we're all in this together, even though some of us may not be of US nationality, some aren't even voting, but we're all seem to be glued in and interested in what is going on in politics in the United States. And I feel that social media may have a little bit of a part to play in that specifically. I mean, a lot of our campaigning that we've seen this campaign season has happened on social media, I think for two reasons. One, because the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of, flexibility around being able to host as many rallies or as many campaign programs as we've seen in the past. So a lot of it was coming to us on our social media platforms. And also just because that is where basically everybody and their mother has a social media account right now, at least on one of the platforms. So that's where a lot of the conversations are happening around what's going on in the world right now. And that's also a lot of the conversations around the elections and how people are voting and how others are urging others to vote. Though voting is closed now in the United States, it is important that everyone in whichever country they are able to exercise their rights to vote, exercise those rights, because, democracy allows the people to essentially have the power to pick who should be their leader. But today, I think that it's important to note that social media is specifically not limited to just Twitter and Facebook, as I've discussed how the campaigns have happened a lot on social media. It also includes WhatsApp, which is also owned by Facebook too. But social media is bigger than we've known it to be. It's definitely grown. The amount of users we see on it every single day has grown. As I said, everybody and their mother has a social media account. I'm pretty sure your grandmother has a social media account somewhere. Basically, the whole world is on social media. And that says a lot about the kind of information that we're constantly seeing. We're seeing a lot of content coming to us from different directions every single day. We're taking in a lot in a very short period of time, and it's very easy for us to spread information nowadays. Now, before I dive into today's topic, I just want to give a little definition of what social media is, just so we can keep it in mind as we get into our chats for today. So the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines social media as forms of electronic communication, such as websites for social networking and microblogging, through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content such as videos. Now, the point that I want to dive into is the spread of information, especially visual content. We see a lot of images, we see a lot of videos on a daily basis, and sometimes we see a lot of gruesome stuff that we can't really digest on a normal basis. And some people are saying that maybe we're becoming more desensitized to violence since we're seeing so much of it so quickly on essentially a daily basis now. Some saying that it's important that we see these images to ensure that we know exactly what's going on around us, and there's no opportunity for people to, live in blissful ignorance or willful ignorance anymore. That social media has